It's the action, point no relaxing. Straight from off the rails with your host, Mr. Patrick. Show we attack, then defend and react. Calculate the damage, then resolve in a snap. Facts with this here and Ember Blade, leave no witnesses. I just close the combat chain and we winning this. Listen, this a blaze, we ain't going scar for scar. And I'm feeling like a hero, we ain't going card for card. It's the action, point no relaxing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Action Point. I'm your host, Patrick Shaw, and we are on episode 5 of the podcast. Thanks, everyone, for joining me. I'm looking outside. I think I see Rob Thomas and Carlos Santana because it is a hot one today. Nathan, I don't know where you're from, but I'm in Massachusetts, and it's like 80 degrees right now. It is scorching.
I'm in Alabama, so it's a little bit warmer down here.
All right, yeah. So you get it.
Oh, absolutely.
So obviously Nathan Crawford is sitting here right in front of us, but I will go through my intro with him. So today's guest strikes fear in the heart of every Oldham player. For as much as the Elemental Guardian has become known to fatigue many a deck, Nathan Crawford has garnered a reputation for being the fatigue killer. When he's not being one of the best constructed players in the game in big tournaments around the world, as part of the Card Guyz competitive Flesh and Blood team, you can catch one of his weekly gameplay streams, breaking down tier lists or doing commentary for Fab Team Cup matches and more over on the Card Guyz YouTube channel. Nathan, welcome to the Action Point.
Thank you, Pat. Thanks for having me. There's a lot of great players out there that deserve to have their stories told and everything, and it's just great to be one of those and have the opportunity. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Been a big fan. I consider basically you and Sam Dando as like my Briar inspirations. I've been a Briar player basically since pre-release on Tales, and you're very much one of the players I shamelessly hijack my lists from, all the way down to the sideboard. But it's great to have you on. I've always been following your streams lately as well, and it's just I've had Josh Lau on when I was on the combat chain. I've had some good interactions with the Card Guyz before, so always good to have you guys on. I've interacted a little bit with the team, the Fab Team Cup as well.
That was great. Yep.
There, so it's just you guys are good. Glad to have you on.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
All right, let's get rolling here. In my discussions over the last year or so with people, I found it fascinating how much of a convergence point Flesh and Blood has been for gamers of all types. There's different games, backgrounds from everybody. We've learned like the Hyperloops are big, like Star Wars CCG players. The Sunflower Samurai guys are like Legends of the Five Rings guys. There's a couple Netrunner aficionados, and obviously a bunch of Magic players. I'd like to know, tell us a little bit about your gaming background and how you found Flesh and Blood.
Sure. So unlike most people that play Flesh and Blood, I do not have another trading card game background. I played a very small amount of Yu-Gi-Oh, like kitchen table stuff way back when I was in like middle school. But as far as like trading card games, that's my only like experience. So I came into Flesh and Blood really new. It was around the COVID time where everybody was looking for a reason to be social. And I was like, Yu-Gi-Oh was kind of cool back then. I was like, let me try something like that, get into these game stores and kind of like have a little bit of fun, interact with some people. So I was, did a YouTube search, like top 5 card games in 2020, whatever, and found Flesh and Blood. And I was like, okay, well, like, how much is this going to cost me kind of thing? And looked up a box, and it was, ironically, it was a first edition alpha box, and it was like $7,000. I was like, hang on, when was this game made? And I looked it up, and it was like 2019 is when it was printed. I was like, how is something 2 years old $7,000? So when I got into Flesh and Blood, it was purely financial speculation. I went and found a card shop that would sell me Monarch first edition boxes for MSRP back when they were going for like $300, and I opened them all up, sold them, made a decent amount of money, and bought a playset of everything. And it turns out the game was great, and I just stuck with it. And I love playing the game, and I wouldn't look for anything else.
Excellent. So obviously you compete at a pretty high level, and you are part of the Card Guyz competitive Flesh and Blood team. How did you come to join the Card Guyz?
Absolutely. So the best way I recommend, if anybody's looking to join a team of any kind, the best way you can do it is just beat them. If you beat them enough times, they have to ask you to join, and that's the only way that they can kind of tame you, if you will. So I'm in the Alabama region. So is Josh Lau, and the rest of the Card Guyz are kind of home based out of the Atlanta area, Atlanta, Georgia. So any skirmish event, road to nationals, anything of that nature, we would all see each other, and when we would play. I came off of a solid performance at 2021 US Nats, the first one, the one Tark Patel won. I finished 20th there. Ironically enough, I was playing Channel Mount Heroic Briar, not Lightning Briar that everybody else was playing. Had a great tournament. My last opponent was Dan Rakowski. It's just funny how these names just like recirculate from so long ago. Yeah. And he ended up beating me in that one. He took 10th and I took 20th, but it was a great performance. The Card Guyz asked me and Josh to join the team at the same time, and we were more than happy to do so. And here we are.
Excellent. Now you bring up Channel Mount Heroic Briar. When most people think of you in your tournament play, they do associate you with Briar. What goes through your head when people claim you as like one of the marquee Briar players out there?
Well, I mean, I would say that I'm a Runeblade main is kind of how I would put it. I wouldn't necessarily. I basically just play. Historically, I've played the best Runeblade that there was at the current time. Just like you said, when Tales of Aria pre-release came out, I showed up to. I built a deck specifically to just beat Josh because we used to go to the same armory, and I showed up with like a Briar deck with a bunch of captain's calls and just never pitch anything and always get embodiments. And I mean, I ran that armory for 2 months probably, and then I ended up switching to Channel Mount Heroic for nationals. But I've just always loved the class as a whole, the ability to really be aggressive but patient at the same time, and I think it's very rewarding.
Now she's creeping towards Living Legend status here. Are you concerned at all about losing Rosetta Thorne here in the near future?
I think everybody or every Runeblade player is scared of losing that card. But I think we have to keep in our back pocket. Reaping Blade is one lower card rate that's not split damage. And it's not the worst. And we have Dust Till Dawn that might give us another tool to utilize. So, I mean, there are things to worry about with the LL coming up, but this is the third time that I've shifted from Runeblade to Runeblade. I originally started on Combo Viscerai, and that was the first deck that I truly loved in Flesh and Blood. And then Scalata got banned, right? And then so I went to Chain, and then Chain LL'd, so I went back to Briar, and so I've been having to adapt and pivot before, but at the end of the day, I'm also trying to grow as a player, and I really want to expand on my hero pool and kind of branch out a little bit. There are good and bad parts in Flesh and Blood about being a specialist, and I'm really trying to trying to dodge some of the bad parts of it, of being like pigeonholed into a certain situation or tournament, and kind of branch out a little bit.
Was Skeleton an unjust ban, or should we get it back?
No, we should not. We should not get it back. But I tell you what, I would love it if they would just wipe the text out and just give me the 2-block temper on the chest.
Yeah, I would absolutely take that.
If they would give me that, I would play Briar in a heartbeat at Pro Tour, because you could just jam the armor on the first, Red in the Ledger against Azalea and call it a day.
Yeah. Nope, I agree. The Skeleton ban at just the wrong time. I played Briar in New Jersey, and I still remember just wanting so bad to block 2. Yep. It just couldn't happen.
Absolutely.
One too many. I had Dozer inspired prisms with just lunging presses floating around that just were killing me left and right. All right. So we talked about when I brought you on, I introduced you as kind of fatigue killer. I think the marquee moment here for that kind of reputation. Day one of the Calling Indianapolis. During round 5, you were the featured match on stream as Briar facing Oldham. That game ended with you recycling several cards in order to eventually overwhelm Oldham and win the game, protecting yourself against fatigue in the process. I want to talk specifically about that game and that build using Rites of Replenishment. It seemed like before that game, most people were just throwing around some evergreens into their sideboard and trying to create a loop that way. How did those specific cards come together in your testing process?
Great question. So I wasn't necessarily against the Evergreen package. Basically, I ran the Evergreen package in 2021 Nats and actually fatigued a Bravo during that tournament. It was actually a very good Bravo player because he later, the next day, top 8'd the Calling in Orlando. So a very strong player that was on the Hyperloops. Fatigued his Bravo with an Evergreen loop in the Channel Mount Heroic deck there. So it's not that it's a bad package. There's just one that's better is basically what it boiled down to. And my thought process was on it. Anytime you're looking to fatigue or prevent from being fatigued against an opponent, is the biggest factor is opportunity cost, right? So any deck could throw in 20 more cards or just, I'm sure every deck, if they just solely predicated their deck on beating fatigue, they could probably do it. But if the Oldham accidentally ends up being aggro or mid-range, then you just lose that game because your deck's really diluted and things like that. So the way that I looked at it was basically the Rites was much harder to disrupt, right? And the thought process there is the Evergreen is a 3-card loop. You have to pitch a card to play it, play the Evergreen from Arsenal, and then reload the second one. But against Oldham, you actually have to have a 4-card hand because if you get ice reacted, you can't put the Evergreen into the Arsenal to then play it the next turn. So that loop is very disruptible. Whereas the difference for Rites of Replenishment, you fuse, the trigger happens, he can ice react to the cows come home, it doesn't matter. That Rites of Replenishment in the graveyard is going to the top of your deck. And that's just how it's happening. So it was more, and then if I'm wrong, if I'm playing against aggro Oldham, guess what? Rites of Replenishment blocks 3, where Evergreen blocks 2. Mm-hmm. So no matter which direction the match would have went, I thought Rites of Replenishment was a better option. And then another little spicy tidbit, if anybody wants to take Briar to Pro Tour. If you save your Bramble Spark and ping yourself with the Arcane, you can actually trigger both parts on the Rites and put a Bramble and Rites on the bottom and do a loop of 9 instead of 6. So that's a nice little piece of spice there.
It is a bigger number than 6, right? You always
that's
want that, especially late, right? All right. So continuing on the fatigue route here, recently streaming Katsu, you brought up another instance of fatigue prevention, utilizing Time Snap Potion Magenchi release with Lord of Wind to create a combo shortcut specifically to combat a fatigue strategy. So it's more prevalent these days with the banning Winter's Wail and that style of Oldham out there. But just how many different fatigue plans do you have out there, and what kind of process do you go through to get to a point where a fatigue plan works?
Okay, so it's actually anytime I look at a deck, it's probably not correct thing to do, but it's actually the very first thing I look at. And it's more of just something me personally, I never want to lose to fatigue. It just irks me in like the worst kinds of ways, because the way that I look at it is like, if they're going to give me a blank canvas in 55 minutes, I'm going to paint them something real nice is the way I look at it. Mm-hmm. And so basically, if you lose fatigue, it's kind of your fault because you're the only one making any real decisions in the match. Mm-hmm. And I don't want that to be the case, right? So for the listeners, I'll make it as easy as 1, 2, 3, right? 3 steps for beating fatigue in any deck building process, right? Number 1, we've kind of already touched on it. Opportunity cost, right? You don't want to, just adding 2 rights to your deck doesn't doesn't ruin the match if the Oldhim ends up being aggro or mid-range, right? You just block with those cards and go about your day. Whereas adding 15 cards is really gonna hinder that matchup if you end up being wrong. The second is the overwhelming fundamental concept of threat density within a deck. Now, what is threat density? Threat density is basically just add up the attack of all the cards in your deck. And if you add cards in your deck, for example, let's say Electrify or some card like that has an on-hit effect, or that does damage only if it hits. The theoretical threat density of that card is 0, right? Because if you're playing against Fatigue, it's a very good chance that that's not going to hit. So that card is not contributing anything to your strategy. Whereas an Embolism is always going to give you 3 more damage. So you kind of have to evaluate your cards in that way. And that's why it's been so difficult to fatigue Lexi, is all those arrows come in for 5. You know, the really big attacks that cost, you know, lower amounts of resources to play, even though you have to factor in the bow as well. But there's just a lot of threat density in that deck, especially with the recursion of Codex of Frailty. So having a good fundamental concept of threat density is very important if you want to beat fatigue. And then the third step, your fatigue plan cannot be reliant on your opponent doing or not doing something. Now, what do I mean by that, right? So you basically have, let's take the Mugenshi example that you just named, right? Just for the listeners that didn't catch the stream, right? My whole fundamental concept of the Mugenshi anti-fatigue package is you play a time snap potion, you pop that time snap, you shortcut the Mugenshi line, and you just say Mugenshi, Lord of Wind. Nowhere on Mugenshi or Lord of Wind does it say anything has to hit. It doesn't say anything about, all it says is if this was the previous card, and we just shortcut it and we get straight to it, right? We can't get ice reacted. There's nothing that can happen. That line, you could eat a Spinal Crush to the face, and it does not stop that play because the time snap is action points, not go again. So it literally plays around every single thing Oldhim is trying to do. And that's how you have to develop your systems as far as beating fatigue, is saying, you know, that's why I went to the rights. I want to say, okay, well, I don't want to hold 4 cards so I don't get ice reacted. I just want to get the net result without my opponent having any agency over whether I can or not.
Now, this might be a little broad brush here, but sure. Like Time Snap and Mugenshi release in those cards have existed for a very long time, and so hasn't the concept of fatigue. How do you put those together? What are you doing here to get to this combination of cards to be that effective?
So this one, if I'm being honest, it was a complete accident. What ended up happening was, anybody that's been on our YouTube channel, we do these fun little like games, and the one that we play the most of is like, we'll do like a Fab Jeopardy, right? Where they'll pop up a question and we play it as a team, and it's just a good time, just some entertainment kind of stuff. And one of the questions was the lore text for Lord of Wind. And I remember that was one of the questions I got wrong, so it really irked me. So I just always remembered it, and it has to do with filling the graveyard, the battle going a long distance, you know, stuff like that. So as I was building my Katsu deck for the stream, like 30 minutes before I was starting on stream, I was like, I have to find a way to beat that, because you have Rampart, you have Crown of Seeds, your Kodachis are useless. I have to come up with a way. And so I looked at that, and I remembered that, and I said, hold up. If we just shortcut this, we can do it. And that's how I stumbled upon that one. As far as Rites of Replenishment goes, like it was really just an upgrade. I was building other elemental Briar decks, kind of like how I imagined the devs were imagined Briar would be played instead of with 40 generics. But that list had Rites of Replenishment because you can fuse it and get go again from like Weave Lightning and stuff like that. So that was something that came from another deck. So I think it really boils down to keeping an open mind on a hero's card pool. And I highly encourage, especially if you're a specialist, every time a new set comes out, go on FabDB or Fabrary. I recommend Fabrary, and just click on edit and read every card.
Mm-hmm.
Click on every single tab that says any card that is in your card pool and just read it. And just, if anything, like, feels like it's any what's so useful, read it again and then just ask yourself how you can apply it. And you can get to a lot of those strategies.
Is there any other like kind of secret fatigue packages that you just have in your back pocket right now? Is there an unsung hero that you're just ready to break open here and just ruin Oldham's day come Baltimore?
Okay, so I have a little piece of spice, but unfortunately it helps the Oldhams. It doesn't hurt them. Okay. It helps fatigue the Rangers. Okay. All
right.
So this is actually not anti-fatigue.
Edit this part out. No.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that I've been doing on the other side of the equation, because if you know how to fatigue people, it's much easier to learn how to beat it. I think it's a very important concept to, like my Goliath Gauntlet game against Chris Lyalley, I ended up fatiguing him because I had a good understanding of how he was going to sideboard when he saw my hero and go from there. So if you knowing how to fatigue greatly increases, but the nice little piece of spice that I'll recommend, if anybody's having trouble with Lexi specifically, it still works a little bit with Azalea, but if they Codex you, play one copy of Infectious Host, okay? And what Infectious Host does is a 0 for 4 generic attack. And it doesn't have to hit. It just says, when you play this, check all 3 tokens. If you own any of them, give them to your opponent. So what I like to do is they'll Codex and then go get like a sedation shot or infectious shot. And I'll let it hit me just by a little bit. I'll let it do 1 point of damage just so I get the token. And then on my turn, I'll just give all the tokens right back at them. That's my little piece of spice.
That is spicy. Oh, all right. See, that's good. There's some people have like a deeper understanding of the game than others, and I'll tell you, I'm not coming up with that kind of stuff for sure. Let's talk about what to expect coming into Pro Tour Baltimore and subsequently the Calling. Before we talk cards and strategy, you and your team have been to a few of these. I'm always interested in the week leading up to an event like this. What does your preparation look like?
Okay, well, right now before Richmond, it looks like just sheer panic right now because everybody's just trying to. Our group is a little bit different than most, I would say, in the fact that our group contains a lot of specialists, right? And so where we get our advantage is, I've played Runeblade most of my time. Josh obviously is a warrior player. Nam is a guardian player. Will plays a lot of illusionist. Everybody kind of has their area that they specialize in, and they've played in most of their, flesh and blood career, if you will. And so the beginning of the testing process is always, how do we get our own heroes to work? And everybody's working on what they specialize in and saying, well, this is working for us. And they say, okay, well, if they could do that, we need to do this. And then the last resort is our heroes won't work. And then those people pivot off and learn from the other people. So as an example, in Pro Tour, Lil, they had to move off of Prism because there were so many Briar there. So I ended up teaching them a lot about Briar, and that's kind of how we operated that event.
Excellent. Going into the days of the events themselves, how do you sustain your energy through multiple grueling days of games being played? What kind of strategies do you employ to make sure that you are both mentally and physically where you want to be going into the later rounds of these tournaments?
First, I would say coffee, and then more coffee.
Yeah.
But I mean, not everybody can do that. Some people have a really low tolerance to caffeine, and I understand that. But me personally, if I could put it in an Ivy bag and just scoot it around, I would do it 100%. But it would just get in the way at the tables. So I just stick with a little. I drink a coffee in the morning, then I'll bring like a little Monster in the bag just to keep me going halfway through. But my main thing is I love playing on an empty stomach. I don't know why. I don't know why. Anytime I eat, I just feel cloudy is the wrong word, but like I just feel like my body's focused somewhere else too, like digesting all that food kind of thing. And maybe that's just me, but I've just historically just done really well eating a solid breakfast and then having a little bit of caffeine to get me through the day, and then like Tylenol if I start getting a headache or something like that. But yeah, just playing on an empty stomach and a little bit of caffeine. Yeah.
All right. I tell you what, that's I've just recently, I guess in the last year or so, finally got a chance to get into some of the callings mostly, but being able to travel and get into them. And I'll tell you what, it is there is no equal to actually sitting down and going through like 7 rounds of 7 or up to 10 rounds of CC in a single day right there. I feel like I'm a big guy as it is. I feel like my brain power burns a lot of calories. Gotta eat between rounds. At the calling Charlotte for around nationals, I was eating like a chicken sandwich around. I could not do. On an empty stomach, I would have been like asleep by round 3. Couldn't do it. But we're all different. We're all different. Right? Everyone's got to find their way to do that. Kind of pivoting from the team aspect here. There's especially over the last year coming into 2023. And this isn't. I didn't prep this, so sorry if it's curveball.
Don't worry.
The team aspect has been, more and more high profile, and it seems like the kind of the cream of the crop has kind of, they're starting to organize. There's factions. It's almost like it's like a wrestling federation now. You get the top stables over there. Do you guys, like, how much of an eye do you keep on, like Team Dragon Shield or Team Wolfpack and, things of those natures? Are you looking to kind of make sure that your results as the Card Guyz are, somewhere equal or comparative to them? Do you feel any kind of pressure to, keep your name at kind of the same level and reputation that, these other teams might have?
Absolutely. So I think everybody obviously wants to perform very well every single tournament. That's obviously a goal that everybody has. At the end of the day, as far as comparing to other teams, I think there is value in that as long as you don't take it too far, right? So what you can do is anytime those teams, put out podcasts or anything like that, listen and learn from their processes. Just like, we talked about, specialist and how we adapt before an event, things like that. And picking up little nuggets from other teams that they leave behind, right? And I think that's the most important thing, is just learning from the other teams. It's obviously a competition. We all want to win. But everybody who doesn't have Michael Hamilton is at a disadvantage. And that's just how it is currently. Yeah. He's doing great. The Wolfpack is on top at the current moment in time, and that's okay. Because we're more than willing to give it our best to hopefully take down this pro tour. That's what we all plan on doing. But there is pressure. But at the end of the day, we're a group of guys that really enjoy the game. We love to hang out with each other, and that's what comes first. And then second, we want to be competitive, be good at the game, and put up results. Excellent.
That's a good segue into some card talk. So I was going to have, so I'll just get into it. So you've streamed Katsu, Azuri, and Lexi lately. You said Briar is in kind of a rough spot right now. Azalea terrifies everyone. And there's the specter of Oldham that feels like people were maybe dismissive of after the Chicago PTI brawl, but resurfaced after a Realm Games Invitational that saw Dagan White take it down with his and everyone's favorite Fatigue Oldham. Just as of this recording, yesterday you actually live streamed a very in-depth analysis of the deck breakdowns and how everything is working, and even looking at the I have the spreadsheet open up right in front of me, and it doesn't seem like it's it's kind of the Wild West out there still. It seems like there is no there's no 90-10 very odds on number one deck in the format. And it seems like for the first time in a long time that this is really, the meta is diverse. It's, dare I say, a bit balanced. And it is, I think it's kind of, it seems like it's anyone's game at this point. If there is, well, I guess before we get into the breakdown, are there any decks besides Azalea that you feel has gotten kind of a huge benefit from this current environment that didn't necessarily see like a ton of play or action, like pre-outsiders, but is kind of now taking advantage of, kind of the shift here?
I would say that any deck that really had a hard time thriving in a heavy aggro meta got a bump, basically. Basically decks like Dash and Dromine and decks like that really don't want to compete with being the fastest deck really got an advantage with this new set coming out, because the game has shifted in a way where the aggro decks actually have to play both sides of the game. They're not just playing solitaire, because there's so many on-hit effects in the game currently that you can't just sit there and slap each other and take turns. The game, which is a great thing, right? That's probably what LSS set out to do with this set, was to say, hey, we're tired of people just throwing up 5-card hands at each other until somebody hits 0. Like that's good for the game. We want exciting stuff, but at the same time, we want interaction. We want, what's the point of drawing a new hand every turn if you're just using it all the same way every single time? It kind of takes out the core fundamentals of the game of, probably how LSS envisioned it. So, I would say that Dromai and Dash are probably the two decks that were kind of lower on the totem pole that get a little bit of a bump.
You talked about the aggro decks needing to adapt. Can they? Like, is Phi? When Belittle got banned, it seemed like everyone just threw Phi down, completely dismissed it. It went from S tier all the way to to F tier, unplayable garbage. I think that's a little dismissive of it. But is there a room? Is there room for something like a Phi, or even a Katsu with that more kind of aggressive tilt? Is it just a matter of teching, or do they really have to change their their foundational game plans, like as we've known it, in order to succeed here?
I think, especially talking about decks like Phi and Katsu, I think that they have to find a way to answer two questions. They need to have a situation where they can prevent, have enough, blocking potential or prevention in the deck to create an opening window 1 or 2 times during a game. But the problem with that is when you add cards like Reinforce the Line or D-Reacts to a very aggressive deck, you indirectly you pay an opportunity cost by making the deck less aggressive. So you're like adding cards that are going against what the deck's trying to do. Katsu is kind of an exception because you can, with the ability, trade that card in, assuming it's a 0 cost, and go get the combo piece, and go about your day. So Katsu gets a little bit of a buy there. And so I would say Katsu will have an easier time adapting to that strategy than Fi will. And because he also has tools that he can utilize, like he has Flick Flack, and he sometimes plays Art of War, sometimes doesn't. So that's one less card that doesn't block out of the deck. The only downside is he doesn't have really good armor in the chest slot, unlike Fi, whereas Fi has the furnace, and that can really be utilized to open a window. So I think if they can answer the question of creating a window or two into the Rangers to leverage a lot of value without paying an abundant opportunity cost, I think we have a real deck.
Excellent. Azalea. So Azalea really had the coming out party at the Chicago Brawl. Right? You saw Brody Spurlock and Levi Roush in the finals in a mirror, and like throughout the day, the fervor over Codex of Frailty, and just now Ranger is OP. All of a sudden, right, dismissing Azalea, and now Ranger is too powerful. Is Azalea the boogeyman here coming into Baltimore? Is the fear justified? And was Codex of Frailty a mistake?
Well, we'll save the best for last. We'll save the Codex for last. As far as is Azalea the boogeyman? And I think indirectly, yes, but I think her game is so linear and telegraphed that everybody that shows up to Pro Tour will have a plan into Azalea. You just can't show up without it. You can't, whether that be unmovable, reinforce the line, more sink blows, whatever the case may be, whatever you as a player, as a deck builder, come to the realization of, you will show up to Pro Tour with a solution for Azalea. You just have to, because she is good to the point to where she has to be answered. She is asking a question that needs to be answered. There are a couple decks like Lexi that will take advantage of that, because the same tools that are used to counter Azalea, you can't counter Lexi with. Right? Your immovable, one, is not going to get full value, and if they give you a Frostbite, you're going to have to pay an extra card for it. So there's a lot of she has a lot of gain because she can attack on multiple axes, whereas everybody knows what Azalea's trying to do, and everybody will have a plan for it. So to sum it up, I do think that she's the boogeyman, but I think she's the boogeyman that everybody knows the answers to, and nobody's saying it. And I think that there'll be a lot of players playing Azalea, but I don't think it's going to go too well.
Now, is there a difference between respecting a popular deck archetype and strategy like Azalea and warping a meta? Is Azalea at that level of I guess ubiquity?
Yes, I would say that she has impacted everybody's deck list.
Yeah,
100%. I would say that she has achieved that status for sure. It's just with Red in the Ledger and all these on-hit effects, you just can't walk into Baltimore and not have a plan for her. She's not going to let you. And but Peace of Mind, Oasis, and Reinforce the Line, I think are going to be the real cards to look out for that she'll have some trouble with.
Red in the Ledger is especially aggravating when you can fire it off 6 times. Codex of Frailty showing up in spades here. I kind of threw it out in front, but there's a lot of talk about it, right? 0 for 8 floor value is the complaint. It's easier to set up than all the other. People complain about Art of War, Channel Not Heroic, right? All of these kind of similar cards, but depending on who you talk to, Codex is the worst offender of them all. What is your take on Codex of Frailty in today's environment?
I think it's good and bad. The way that I look at that card is we've never had a card in the game of Flesh and Blood that had an on-hit effect that didn't have to hit. I don't think anybody can name a single card that has an on-hit effect that doesn't have to hit, right? The only cards that come to mind are like Chains of Eminence and but those cards are like I mean they're literally like hot dog water. They're so bad because you have to pay like such a high deck cost to enter those into your deck, whereas Codex of Frailty is literally a yellow card that can be used for like 20 different things. It blocks. I would say that currently Codex of Frailty is a problem. I think once LSS gives us more tools like Down and Dirty and Infectious Host that we can interact with that card, then I think it'll be in a fair place. But until we get those tools, it's a little rough. I mean, like you said, it's a 0 for 8 floor. And that's just insane.
It's a scary number for people.
Absolutely.
I think the majority of Flesh and Blood players operate at a level where I think that kind of the turn cycle value isn't there, right? We're still at, good cards are good, bad cards are bad, and sometimes I'll put these down and do a thing. But you get to Hamilton-esque, all right, I have, my 2-card 7 damage over time is, you get into the percentage points, and then Codex of Frailty shows up, and that just, you can see the veins start going on people's forehead. Because it really is, it's innocuous almost in its operation. Like you don't, it's not so much in your face, right? As like a Channel Mount Heroic turn or an Art Award turn, and getting that value, or even like a Rain Razors, right? Or something like that. It's quietly putting, just quietly over, the end, your turn into the next turn, you're just quietly getting those things that, and people, it's not as, I guess, as sexy, as some of these other ones, but it is a, it's legit. I think that, Assassins and Rangers needed something. I don't think they can.
They did.
My little, I guess I'm a little biased because I love Assassin, but it didn't seem like they could get over the hump with like the constraints of like the game mechanics as it stood, right? They needed to break something in order to kind of give them a leg up here. And I think that's Codex. Should it be banned? Should it be banned after Baltimore?
It depends on what's in Dusk Till Dawn.
Okay.
If like I mentioned earlier, there is something on the way that helps us interact with that card in some way, or like, add it to the sideboard so that way if somebody plays that card, we can punish it in some way. If there's more tools like that, then leave it. But you made a great point on the Assassins really needing a bump. To be honest, I think Assassins utilize that card better than Rangers do. And if that card was Assassin only, I would actually be perfectly okay with it. I think just in the Ranger toolkit, it just does everything. You can pitch it for an arrow. You can go get the arrow you don't have. You can bring the opponent's defenses down so that way your arrow will hit. I mean, it literally just does every single thing that you could ask on a card, and it blocks. So
it's a pretty solid combination there.
Not the word.
Now, last night you had your live stream. The stream is literally called the Best Pro Tour Deck. I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, the conclusions here and I guess how they might affect people. I came in late, and I asked the audience there who we got to where we needed to go, and they told me that it was Adromai and Bravo were. It came out basically on top of all the other heroes, and in the process, you are very directly responsible for skewing whatever the meta was before you stream that. Now we're going to see a bunch of Dromais and Bravos coming up. You're going to have to adjust the the meta share coming up. I already see people posting, all right, looks like I'm running Dromai here. Now, how much? Dromai and Bravo historically, at least in the last recent history, haven't converted, right? And that's been the big thing. Now, when you look at this spreadsheet and what you're talking about, is this more of a like a Swiss friendly constructed deck, or is there a real expectation that Dromai or Bravo could get those conversion rates here that they haven't been able to get so far?
I think it's the real deal, and I think both Dromai and Bravo revolve around Dromai. Basically, what we saw with Outsiders coming out is before Outsiders, right? We had Oldhim that was like kind of countering Fi. Mm-hmm. So you had like polar opposites, right? You had like very controlling, and you had Icelander as well, trying to be very disruptive. There wasn't a whole lot of mid-range in the game. You were either all the way on this side or kind of all the way on that side. There wasn't a whole lot in between. And that's not a situation that Dromai can thrive in, because she needs to know whether she needs to lay down big dragons for control or kind of do more of like what Mara's trying to do, where being a little bit more aggressive and things of that nature. So now that the Rangers have forced aggro out, I think it opens up the opportunity for the Dromai players to knuckle down and just say, look, I'm going to do big dragons control. And, that brings Bravo into the equation. Bravo is better into that than Oldhim. And this is the first time I've ever said that there is actually a reason to play Bravo. I've always been in the camp that why would you ever play somebody with no hero ability over Oldhim, right? And this is the first time that I would actually say that I'd probably prefer Bravo over Oldhim, simply because it's a better Dromai matchup. And you're really not sacrificing, you don't have to worry about Vambrace. You don't have to worry about a lot of tools that people are putting in their decks. And you still get to be that aggressive, big heavy blues, and still be disruptive.
You're really ruining my Azuri testing here. I want you to know that. I was hoping to dodge some Dromais here, but now you just
that matchup so bad.
Just made it a little more difficult for me.
It's so bad.
Now, I know watching the stream, one of the conversations was comparing players of equal skill. I always kind of it's always curious to me about I guess how we kind of judge these matchups here, and I talk that we're probably going to see more Dromais, but how many good Dromais are we going to see, right? And then how many and what kind of testing qualifies as like good testing into like a Dromai player here. But there seems to be kind of a I don't know if I'd call it like a glass ceiling, but especially when it comes to like Talishar testing in particular, there seems to be kind of a stigma around testing against the general population and what that means for, what that actually means for players into these kind of tournaments. And to me, it seems like there's continually disqualifying, I guess, qualifiers into testing until you only get to, you reach the top of the pyramid. There's like 13 people that you could test on and actually mark that as quality data. What does count as quality data and testing right now if we seemingly dismiss most of the players that play the game, it seems?
I think it's a great question. I think the way to round that out is kind of like, basically people are biased toward certain heroes in a lot of way, and a lot of the testing influences that, right? And I think that each matchup has a couple wickets, if you will, that you really need to learn to at least just have a shot. Right? Like if you are, not managing your poppers correctly in Oldhim and you're playing against a Dromai, you're just going to get smoked, right? There's like, that's just a non-game. So I think as long as you're playing against people that fundamentally understand the matchup, or you are playing it to learn said matchup, that's acceptable. But the getting there is painful in that there's not a lot of value there. Mm-hmm. But as both people learn, the end result will be that both of them will learn the matchup. But I think that's what it comes down to, is just getting reps in with people that have a fundamental understanding of what is supposed to happen in the matchup.
Mm. I like that. I will take that. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. I am not what most people would call a limited player, but the Pro Tour will obviously have a draft portion. What has been your experience with drafting outsiders thus far, and how does it compare to previous draft experiences? And can you give my listening audience and also me some pointers on how to navigate some of the early picks? How do you feel about limited? Like as a player, would you consider yourself, are you a constructed guy? You're a limited guy in hiding?
So I definitely am a constructed player. More specifically, at 2021 Nats was the first time when I sat down at the table round one, was the first time I ever drafted a TCG.
All right. Right there with you.
But I too won both pods, so we got there. we did good enough. But that's something that I've identified in the past year as a weakness in my play, and I've been working a lot on it. Mm-hmm. And at Nats, I went 2-1 and then 3-0 the second pod. So I started very inexperienced, but I think over the past year I've worked a lot on it to heavily improve. So I'm getting there. Go ahead.
Do you find yourself in terms of getting ready for like specifically this Pro Tour? Are you focusing more on do you feel more comfortable in the constructed aspects, so you focus more on the draft experience, or do you commit kind of equal time to both formats, knowing that they'll both be played?
Well, I do focus more time into constructed because there's simply more constructed rounds. Mm-hmm. That's kind of my mathematical basis on that decision. Secondly, I think in constructed, I'm probably going to, get some people to disagree, but I think pound for pound, you get a little bit more EV on your time invested in constructed than say limited. So I kind of like to exploit that a little bit, and I definitely don't ignore it. I don't just show up and say, hey, I'm going to force this and see what happens. I'm definitely not on that strategy. But I definitely do spend more time on constructed for sure.
That's fair. I'm sorry, I did cut you. I cut you off to follow up there. But so drafting outsiders thus far, how has it compared to previous draft experiences? How are you enjoying it?
I love drafting it. I started the game in Monarch and never really. My first draft experience, like I said, was Nats, which was Tales of Aria. Mm-hmm. And in Tales of Aria, everybody knew Briar was the best until they found out Oldham was the best. But like Lexi was never really in contention. And then the exact same thing happened in Uprising. Everybody knew Fire was the best. Then people figured out Isolator was the best. Whereas Dromai never really cemented herself in that draft. So, but Outsiders, it's the first format where you can't, almost 90% of your turns, you cannot just use your 5-card hand offensively. You just can't do it. There's not enough go again. There's not, it's forcing you to play on both sides, kind of like WTR is the closest thing that I could compare it to. As far as you said, any tips in drafting it for the listeners, the strategy that I've been utilizing that really has helped a lot in Outsider specifically is referencing Uprising there was not a very big generic pool, right? You kind of were forced to, and you really had to make sure you had 30 cards to play was really the biggest worry. But Outsiders, we really don't have that issue. Most drafts, you're going to end with 34, 35 cards, more than likely, because there's so many generics and you're always going to get one. And I think that's leading people into the play style of my first 3 picks. I'll pick generics, stay open, and then see what's available. Mm-hmm. What I would really challenge the listeners to do is think about that for a second, right? If most people are going to draft generics to stay open, why would you not just take the best class card in the first 2-3 packs within the same class, cut it off so that way by pick 4, the people that have been taking the generics now know that's not available. So you're basically going against the grain to send a message for the people that are trying to stay open. And now the downside is that forces you into knowing how to play all 6 heroes, which I think is very important in draft. You really do need to know how to navigate those deck lists and build them correctly. But I think if you can go against the grain just a little bit and pick the strongest class cards first, unless you just have a bomb generic, then obviously you just have to take that. But I like to pick the strong class cards early to talk the people into playing the other classes that are staying open with generics is the tip I would give.
All right. Excellent. All right, we're rounding the bases here towards the tail end. I want to touch on content here before we start closing it up here. Sure. You wear a lot of hats with the Card Guyz and on the content side. So you've done a lot of commentary for their stream games. You're obviously streaming weekly here. You seem to be one of the more prominent players on the channel these days. Sure. First, is that by design, and what kind of plans do you have kind of moving forward here in terms of content with the Card Guyz in 2023?
Yeah, so it really, if I'm being honest, it really started with the Goliath Gauntlet. When I was invited by Uber and Flake to play in the Goliath Gauntlet, I really, as a player, I kind of asked myself, I put myself in that situation where I was like, did I really deserve it? Because there's so many good players out there, like Dagan White. You got half of the Hong Kong team, Blue Pitch, right? Like there's just so many people that are more qualified than I am to fill that spot. And so I had like almost, it felt like an obligation to step up and kind of do some more stuff to kind of earn what I was preemptively given, basically is the way that I looked at it. Because I felt like I got something a little bit before I'd earned it. And so I'm just trying to earn it, is the way that I look at it.
Right. I respect that. Do you find, so the premier event schedule, it does seem to be a little light there. What are your plans to kind of fill that time if there's not 8 different huge tournaments to get ready for this year?
Well, the streaming has made it very easy to just create content routinely. That's just been, it's just something I like. Oh, it's Wednesday. All right, let me get ready for this, and we'll do our thing. But then, look, it's YouTube, right? So there's always a tier list that needs to be made, right? So we don't hold back on those. Yeah. And we'll come up with a new chart type every single video. It's just what we do, right? It's what we enjoy. We don't ever claim to know everything about every single meta. What we aim to do with those videos is just start a conversation, right? Get in the comments and I disagree with your placement on Iceland, or okay, tell me why, right? And let's have that discourse. I think it's all about community engagement and just interacting with Flesh and Blood. I guess when I started playing Flesh and Blood a week prior, I actually tried to play Yu-Gi-Oh again. I played one armory, whatever they call their armory.
Sure. Yep.
And I immediately sold the cards I bought to play that event at the front desk on my way out.
Yep.
Because every match felt like a bad interaction. Now, that's obviously not the entire Yu-Gi-Oh community. I'm just saying that was my experience. And what I'm also saying is I've been playing Flesh and Blood all over the world for the past year and a half, and I've never had, out of all the tournaments, all the armories, all the skirmishes, the RTNs, the Pro Quest, everything, I played 300 rated games last year, and I never had an experience anywhere near that one Yu-Gi-Oh armory. So I just take a second to shout out the Flesh and Blood community and how amazing and supportive they are as far as just, really getting behind the content creators. It makes the work so easy. It really does.
And absolutely, it's tougher and tougher to say it's not a cult, but it is a happy little community for sure. Especially if you're not on there, get on Fab Twitter. It really is just it's a little utopian. Just a little chunk of social media. It's great. Everyone is very supportive. There's every once in a while, right? Nothing's perfect, but very much for the most part, it's a great place to be. Very supportive environment. Very much a rising tide. Raises all ships environment there, which is very, very nice. Speaking of community, we're going to wrap up with a couple community questions. First from Louver, or I'm a lover. Well, I'm gonna call him that. That is his handle. At Louver asks, peace of mind rated on a scale of I hate it to I'll play it. I'm not sure what's in between those, but
I'll rate it at I'll beat it.
Aye, all right. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. All right, and Dagan White asks, how long until you put Briar down?
Since it came from Dagan, I'd say that I'll put it down when he puts Guardian down. Ooh. And but really, like I said earlier, I'm really trying to grow as a player, and I'm trying to not. There's positives and negatives of being a specialist. I'm trying to kind of branch out, and yeah. So, and then LL is obviously going to force me in that direction, right? And she's only 18 RTN victories away from LL, so definitely not going to be able to play her for Worlds. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep grinding the streams, playing other decks, and learning new things, and we'll pivot soon.
I mean, there's always a shot. You still might. She doesn't seem like she's.
It's possible.
She's quite there. Yeah, it seems like they're conspiring against her. Yep. So you don't have to tell me. Have you locked down what you're playing? Are you still trying to figure that out?
I haven't locked it down. I'm down to a few choices. I would say that right now I'm looking mostly into Bravo, Dash, and you guessed it, Briar. I'm trying to one last look to see if I can make some changes to really adapt to the Rangers game plans and just doing my sanity check and making sure there's nothing there, no new brew that I can create, maybe something like the Goliath Gauntlet list or something like that, kind of catch people off guard. I'm just trying things, and those are the three that I'm currently taking the most serious. I'll probably lock something in after Richmond around Wednesday or so.
It does seem, and maybe this is just me also hoping for some Briar positivity there, but as Azalea has always been kind of a tough matchup there, but as the counters to Azalea come out of the woodwork, I feel like those are a little more vulnerable to Briar. So really, depending on how this kind of shapes up, there might be a window of opportunity here for her. So
exactly.
I'm rooting for you and her. All right.
Absolutely.
I like to wrap up my interviews with one final closing question, and that question is, what is something about you that people may not know that you'd like them to?
Yeah, I really love poker. I used to be like a no limit cash game grinder. I was in the military and I was stationed down in Biloxi, Mississippi, and there wasn't really a whole lot more to do. So I used to be really big into poker cash games and things like that. Other than that, I'm a part of the Fab Dad community. I got 2 kids.
Rock
an
on.
Amazing wife. Yeah. The best Flesh and Blood decision I ever made was actually before I even started playing Flesh and Blood. I found the best woman in the world, and I married her as quickly as I could. And she's just been so supportive and allowing me to go out and do this, by supporting me and in taking care of the 2 kids, while I'm going to events and things like that. So every ounce of success that I have / will have, all of it goes to her.
Awesome. A fellow member of the Fab Dad community.
That's right.
Much more difficult to justify my time investment versus output in terms of win than yours is. But 100%. There's a lot. There's a lot of us out there. The Fab Dads are in force, and it's always good. You get guys like the Chris Rays who are 8 of them walking around, still manages to get down to some of these tournaments here. Excellent. All right. Well, hey, Nathan, thank you very much for coming on to the program. This is going to be your spot here. If you'd like to plug your stuff, where can we find you? Give us the links and the handles and all the good stuff here.
Sure. So the main way that I communicate with the Fab community is going to be on Twitter at Nathan_TCGZ. And yeah, I always put out my stream schedule, stuff like that. Speaking of streaming, every Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Card Guyz YouTube channel, I do a stream. I'm looking at adding another day, still working out what day that might be. Other than that, huge thanks to Fabrec.gg. That's the biggest sponsor for the Card Guyz, and they give us an amazing opportunity to go to these events. And if you haven't checked out that website, it's a great deck statistical tool to utilize if you're really looking at deck building.
Excellent. And thank you again for coming on to the program. Ray,
Thanks for having me.
Hey, absolutely. Anytime, if you're down in Baltimore, we'll catch up there as well. All right, everybody, you are watching / listening to The Action Point. The Action Point theme was written, produced, and performed by Griff. Podcast audio stream is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere else you stream your podcasts. You can find me on YouTube at Off the Rails TCG. Be sure to head over there and subscribe, click the bell notification to see more content coming out all the time. You can find the channel on Twitter as well as also at Off the Rails TCG. You can find my personal account at Pat Smash Good. That's where I do most of my communicating. We do have my other pod, the You Made Me Inc. Disney Lorcana pod with my wife. That you can find us at You Made Me Inc. pod on Twitter as well. She's been digging that. So by all means, check it out. Thanks everyone for joining, and that's going to do it for us. That's a wrap.
It's the Action Point, no relaxing. Straight from Off the Rails with your host, Mr. Patrick. Show we attack, then defend and react. Calculate the damage, then resolve in a snap. Facts with this here and Ember Blade, leave no witnesses. I just close the combat chain and we winning this. Listen, this a blaze, we ain't going scar for scar. And I'm feeling like a hero, we ain't going card for card. It's the Action Point, no relaxing.